Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Dutiful Future show. The content has been rolling out, and today my guest is the fantastic and also very famous student journalist Jonathan Jenkins. Hello.
Hello, Hugh. How are you?
I'm fantastic, thank you. Especially now that I have a guest with such a long list of achievements that I've written down here. So Johnny over here is a multi-award-winning journalist for several different platforms and sections. The current editor of Perspectives, political correspondent, and presenter on Gateway Radio. Appeared multiple times on BBC. What else have I got here? Oh God, a list of achievements that would take an entire podcast to have to list. So I think it's safe to say that Johnny is quite a radio and journalism expert. So what we're talking about today is journalism and radio, getting into these sort of positions, improving what you're doing, and basically just a crash course on careers in journalism. So, Johnny, first number one question here. Your most popular vlog, by the way, Johnny Jenkins on YouTube. Your most popular vlog on your channel is called A Day in the Life of a Radio Presenter. How would you describe a day in the life of a radio presenter?
Well, a day in the life of a radio presenter is different every day. So some days in sort of the normal non-isolation world, I would, if it was sort of in the summer, I would probably get up in the morning. I'd be listening to the radio first thing, finding out what was in the news, what was the top stories, those sorts of things. I would probably go to the gym at the start of the day and be on the treadmill, but also on my phone, checking the emails, booking some interviews, perhaps, depending on what was in the news. I'd be ringing people up or texting people and trying to get people to come on my show later. I'd be arriving. I'd then come back to mine and head off to work. I'd be arriving at work at 11 or 12 and straight away probably into the recording studio to pre-record an interview that I might have booked earlier on, or an interview that might have been in the calendar for a while. I'd record that either in the phone or in the studio. I'd then be also sort of consuming a lot of news throughout the afternoon, meeting people, and then come 4 o'clock, I would be on the radio in my normal drive time slot, and then I would be there until 7, and there'd be some live interviews mixed with a bit of music, a bit of news, and some of the interviews I recorded earlier on. So that's why you need that sort of big awareness of the news of the first thing in the morning, straight taking you through till 7 in the evening, and then I would finish at 7, dead on 7. I would get in the car and I'd try my very best to not consume any more news that day, because I would have had my fair
newsed
share.
out. So the first thing that I think a lot of people hear when they say that is that's a long day. That's a lot of work around radio, and then you add on to that all the other things you do. For example, during uni time, it's a lot of travel. There's perspectives, there's writing, and I think before we sort of go into ways of getting into journalism and these sort of questions, it's very important to lay out in the beginning. Do you have any warnings for those considering radio or journalism as a career? Any sort of major challenges that there are, or anything where any difficulties that would need to be overcome before one considers this as a career path?
I think especially if you are doing it as a student or with other things as well, because I've got to make time for my studying. Also, I don't just have one job. If I just had the one studio job and that was all I was doing, and that would be quite manageable. But you add on studying, which is a job in itself. You add on editing a magazine, you add on appearing on other radio stations, and then the vlogging as well, which I don't do every day, but I do here and there. You've got to love it. You've got to really, really love it, because otherwise it will be such a chore. We've all had those jobs that you don't like, and you go to work dreading it. You wake up dreading it. You come back and you think, oh, got to do that again tomorrow. No, you can't do that with journalism, with radio. You have to love it. You've got to be able to put that energy in, that enthusiasm in all the time, and you can't fake that enthusiasm. It's got to be real.
It's like when we had there was the journalism event at work university, which we both attended, and I believe it was Lewis Goodall who basically said, if you want to be a journalist, you have to live and breathe it. It has to be everything that you do, because it will be everything that you do. And I think at this point, if that hasn't turned anyone off, now we have some advice on how they can actually get into these sort of positions. So as I pointed out earlier, Johnny, you've been widely successful, especially for a student journalist in several different mediums, the BBC, Gateway. What do you think it is, or how do you think you've got these really prominent positions that a lot of people would love to have? Do you have any sort of advice for maybe applications or just things that people can do in order to try and build their profile to apply to these sort of positions?
You've got to really put yourself out there. So if I take you back to the start, so I was in school, I was 14, I had been editing the school newspaper for a while, which I didn't link with sort of being a journalist. It was just something fun I did with my friends. And then I was looking for a work experience placement, and I got a placement at Gateway, where I now work as the editor there. So I went along a bit nervous, not really sure what it was about, didn't really know much about radio. And I think, first of all, you've got to be able just to keep saying yes at the start, at the very start. You've got to. And so you come in and they say, do you want the work experience? Of course you say yes. And they say, do you want it for 2 weeks? And then, of course, you say yes. And they say, oh, and by the way, whilst you're here, we don't normally do this, but would you also like to write some articles for our website? You say yes. Can you come and volunteer at the weekends in the school holidays? Yes. And then these things snowball. I started on work experience, became a volunteer, then got a job eventually out of it. Why did I get that? Out of saying yes. And that led to me having a very good relationship with one of the directors there, in fact, both of the directors, and one of the bosses in particular is very well connected within media. He is the chair of the Community Media Association, which represents all community stations sort of Gateway's level across the country. And so he was then able, because he saw my enthusiasm, saw my love for it, was able to put me elsewhere. So he, when I was in year 11, so about 16, he put me on a placement at the Daily Mirror because he knew someone there. And I'd done the school newspaper, but it was a whole nother level for me. Did that, and then he was able to say, oh, and by the way, here's someone you might want to get to know at the BBC or whatever it might be. And those, so you need the contacts, that's pretty clear. But you can't just settle on that. You need to be also really putting yourself out there, really... just keep meeting people. So a lot of people say to me, "Oh, how do you get onto how do you get onto the BBC?" Right? Because I do regular spots on BBC Essex, BBC London, BBC CWR, which is in Coventry, and I've also been on the BBC TV as well. Well, people say, "Oh, well, how do you get on those slots?" Well, the question is, each of them is separate. Each of them, I've approached someone in particular and said, "Can I come on?" So I got the Essex one through work, I got the CWR one through uni, I got London because I was speaking at an event and the person whose show it was also there, and the TV ones I got from the radio ones I'd already done. So you've just got to keep working, keep putting yourself out there, and keep saying yes to everything. That will always be my first answer. Someone rings me up, say, "Oh, would you like to do this?" Yes. And then you think about it afterwards and you think, how is this going to work?
So it seems like number one is definitely just hard work and putting yourself out there. You brought it up there. You mentioned the concept of the sort of snowball effect, where once you start getting things going and you keep sort of building up, you'll eventually become unstoppable and you'll be able to storm through all of these sort of amazing placements. And I guess if you tell it to someone, I imagine their first question would be, yes, but how do I get that first thing? How do I get onto that first rung of the ladder? Because a lot of the time, to get noticeable, people think they need to get on a sort of a relatively high position, or how does someone get into the first rung of this ladder and start to begin this snowball effect?
So you don't need to be on the BBC straight away. You need, I would suggest that you work on something else which sort of allows you to work out who you are as a journalist, to develop your sort of on-air personality or whatever it might be. So I started on the radio, and I can listen back to my first shows, and although I'd obviously done practice and everything else, you think I'm still finding myself as a radio presenter whilst I'm on air. So so that in a way was fortunate, because it meant that I was obviously able to go on the radio, and that was really cool. But it meant that I probably made a lot of mistakes on the radio at the start. I think someone once said to me, you need to just keep creating content. And maybe they said originally you need to start a website and create content at least once a week. And so I would write some articles for my blog, and no one was really reading them, but I was creating content. I also used to do, before this YouTube channel I have now, I used to do YouTube magic, and that is all, before you start searching, is all removed. But it was
it's all I was going to link it onto this video, just the whole screen for the rest of it would be your magic YouTube channel.
You won't find it, but it's a great way of me creating content in the first place. It's so easy to make things yourself, whether you start up a Twitter account and you post videos on there, or if you do YouTube videos yourself or whatever, and then you can say to someone, "Oh, look, I would really like to get involved with whatever your station or your show or whatever it is. Oh, and here's some content I do. If you're a student, write for the student newspaper, go on the student radio station and get that experience in, because you could be you could know every sort of button in the world when you go into a radio studio, but the actual sort of personality and the skill of presenting takes time. It takes time to develop for anyone. So you just need to sort of really put yourself out there. And sometimes that means sending messages and sending emails that you know you're not going to get a response to. Every few weeks or so, I go through my Twitter and I go through, and I'm always following people on Twitter and following new journalists and things that I haven't seen before. And sometimes they follow you back. And I go through the people that follow me back and I send them all a message. So, for example, if I want to get involved with the company they work for, I'll send a message, say, hi, this is me. Is there any way I could come in for a day and sort of see what you do? And you'd be surprised at how many of these people come back, especially young journalists who were in your position 5 years ago. You know, I got one recently from when I sent out a lot of messages, and I sent out a message to someone quite senior at a national radio station and said, can I come in for a day? They had a look at my CV. They came back and said, actually, come in for a week. Let's do a proper work experience. And
Wow.
I was shocked. In fact, it was postponed because of the coronavirus, so I'm yet to do it. But you'd be surprised at how much can come just from one message.
So you talk about the importance of people, creating their own content and basically showing that they can do these sort of creative endeavors. What sort of advice would you have for someone to, I guess, whether it be a blog or a YouTube channel or a podcast? What advice would you have to help these people, I guess, sort of build their content, or how often they should be posting, how they can sort of get more eyes onto their content, or so to make it seem more, I guess, more presentable? Do you have any advice for the sort of to making that whatever they create to be more attractive to these sort of businesses?
I had this sort of problem recently when I set up the YouTube channel that you mentioned. I set that up a couple of months ago, and I came up with this idea on a Friday that I was going to start YouTube, and I got really excited. And I couldn't stop thinking about it over the weekend. And I said, okay, Monday is going to be the first video. And I did the video and I watched it back, and I thought I could see at the start that I was a bit sort of, you could tell I was being recorded. I sort of wasn't quite myself, and I showed it to some people, and they said, oh, you really sort of got into it towards the end, and you watch your videos now, and if you know me, you say, oh, that's Johnny, that's how he's like. But at the start, it's a bit like, hello, welcome, this is Johnny. And it took a while to find my feet in it. You mentioned how regularly you should be posting. Well, when I set up the channel, I said, I am going to post 2 videos a week. Now, that's on top of all the radio content I do, which at the moment it's every day the radio content. And I said I'll do 2 a week, no matter what. I'll always do 2. And then as I got into it a bit, I thought, actually, no, what matters is the quality of the content, not necessarily the quantity. So I would say you need to put content out regularly, and so I'm not saying you should do it sort of once a month or just whenever it feels right. But I think if you work on the content and you ensure that each piece of content you put out is good, then just whatever feels right. So regularly enough for people to remember you're there, but not sort of too much that you bombard people. That's something I'm really conscious of, because where I'm doing all this radio and everything else elsewhere, sometimes I think all these people that follow me on social media must be so sick of me. But it's also, you've got to put yourself out there, and sometimes you're overthinking it yourself, and actually they quite enjoy seeing your content.
So specifically on quality of content, I think there's a lot of advice around there, whether it's from magazines like The Bore or perspectives from yourself, around helping people with improving their writing. But I think one area where a lot of people don't receive that much advice, or there isn't that much support, people who are trying to start it out, would be things like radio or presenting. What sort of advice or tips or tricks do you think you have to help people improve in these sort of specific areas if this is something they want to start doing? Things like hosting their own live show, or creativity in their content. Do you have any advice or learning experience that you've had around this area?
So I think you need to listen to a lot of radio yourself. If you want to do radio, I think you need to understand what other people do and how it works. So sometimes on a day when I'm at uni and I'm not actually going to work, I'll probably wake up listening to the Today programme. I'll probably get bored of it after a while and go to Radio 2. And then I'll go to the gym. And as I come back from the gym, I'll probably put on Radio 5. And then as I go to uni, I'll put on LBC. And as I come back, I'll listen to a podcast. And then, you see what I mean? I'm listening I'm consuming a whole range of things, some music, some news. And I think you need to develop an understanding of what other people do. And you will be really surprised that the more radio you listen to, the more you become and sound like you're on radio yourself. In terms of making up sort of features or ideas or building a show, I find it incredibly hard to build a show, because the shows that I've always done on Gateway they've never been the Johnny Jenkins show. It's always been Drive Time with Johnny or Breakfast with Johnny or whatever. And so the structure was already there for me. I knew that at 15:15 I read the travel news, and at 15:30 I read the headlines, etc. And so this is something that I've struggled with before. So last year at Raw, I did a breakfast show, and they said, okay, here's 2 hours, do what you want with it. And I really struggled, sort of like, how am I going to fill these 2 hours? There's no structure. But you've got to create that structure yourself. So I would always do the ad break at 15:30, and at or on the hour I would read the news or whatever it might be. I think you need to create a bit of structure yourself, because I find that quite difficult. I think structure is really important. And so if it's a live show, if it's like an hour or 2 hours or whatever it might be, there's a great method of just drawing a clock and saying, in these first 5 minutes there will be a song, and then there will be a short chat, and then in these next 5 minutes, and you sort of draw this clock round, and then you've created this show, and it's there, and you've got some structure to fall back on, and you think, okay, I'm approaching 15:15. What happens at 15:15? Oh, I've got that feature that I've made up. In terms of making up those features and things, there's never really a new idea in radio. Someone has always done it before, even if you're not aware of it. So just be creative, listen to other people, see what they're doing. You can adapt to what they're doing, but make it your own. Sometimes I will run a new feature, and I think, so when I started the Johnny Jenkins show, I said, okay, I was going to do a showbiz spot where I'd read silly showbiz headlines about how Katie Price has been pat doing this or whatever, and sort of take the mick out of them. And that was the idea. But I didn't like it. I did it a couple of times, and I thought, no, this isn't me. It's not working. I'm forcing it. I don't sound like myself. And I knew you've got to be, you are your own best critic. I knew it wasn't my best work. I stopped running it. I thought, well, this feature's boring. I'll put another song on instead. People enjoy that more. So I think you have to be just up for trying new things, but also aware that sometimes they don't work. I used to do a feature a few years ago called there was this dog on Facebook that would write like a dog diary. And so I got in touch with these people and said, can I use this on the radio? And they said, yeah, sure. It was a charity. I promoted the charity as well. And I would like read out the dog's diary, and it was funny for a month or something. This is a weekly show, so I did it a few times.
Couldn't have lasted forever.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it was a fun feature at the first, but you've got to be your own critic. You can't keep going with the same sort of stale features all the time, because if you're not enjoying them, if you're not having fun, or if you're not interested, because it's not always about having fun. Sometimes news radio is a bit more sort of serious. If you're not enjoying it and sort of interested in it, then the listeners won't be either.
I think that points on a big thing in most like creative mediums, whether it be radio or writing or anything around this area, is that like being creative but also being constantly innovative, I think, is quite important as well, where you can't just strike gold and think, oh, this is a fun idea, this is a good idea, a different type of writing I can do in an article or something like that, and then just keep doing it forever. It has to be a constant thing in order to, I guess, start to build this audience. So, for example, you brought up that your shows that you've done aren't the Johnny Jenkins show, but by bringing in creative new ideas, and quite often it changes, it's more dynamic, I imagine there would start to be this following of, oh, that's that Johnny Jenkins guy, I like him on this show, and now he's on this one, and then eventually that builds up to name recognition.
Yeah, and it takes time. You can be on the radio every single day for months, and people don't switch on the radio and listen intently like us radio geeks do. Most people listen and just have it on in the background and don't really listen to what you're saying. And that name recognition, I think some people think, oh, it happened at first, they'll know who I am, but no, they don't. It really, really takes time, and there'll be a lot of people at the station I've been at for now nearly 5 years, and they'll be listening and they have no idea what my name is, and you do have to be aware of that. It's not as showbiz as something like TV where people will recognise you. You walk through the street, no one will know who you are, but that's quite nice in a way, I suppose. But yeah, it just takes time. You just got to make it your own, and just sort of keep developing your ideas, keep being innovative. I've got a great range of things that I do at the moment, but I'm always adding on new things or changing it or trying new things. And look, sometimes things don't work, and if they don't work, the likelihood is people aren't going to remember them.
Hmm. So we talked about earlier about the importance of, I guess, specifically on radio, consuming, other radio shows and just other content. And I guess once again, that can also be applied to things like writing and other journalistic endeavors. And I think for me, it's been quite helpful around student writing, writing for perspectives, for example, or for the bore, is that by reading loads and loads of other articles, I managed to basically make myself different. I found my own niche, basically writing snarky, weird articles. And I guess my question to you would be: do you think that by constantly consuming these other radio shows and basically becoming an expert in the field has allowed you to become more unique and give you your own sort of style or something that would uniquely attract people to your show specifically?
I think so, because you can't just listen to one show and say, right, I'm going to pretend to be that person and I'm going to do exactly what they're doing and have the same level of personality. Sure, you're going to be like compared to people, and there will be presenters in particular that you look up to, but you are eventually going to become a real mix of all these people and all these things you listen to. So I would like to think that a show I do like the Johnny Jenkins show is somewhere between a sort of a student version of something a bit like Jeremy Vine, with a bit of world service thrown in and a bit of my home station and a bit of this and a bit of that. And you do just sort of pick these nuggets up here and there. So, for example, I listened to Jeremy Vine a lot, the person I've just mentioned. I've been to the show, fantastic show, one of my favourites. And I was sat there watching him do his show, and he has this ability to sort of he really alters his tone and really alters the volume of his voice. But as he alters the volume, he sort of moves around the microphone a lot, and it you sort of watch it and you think, oh, that's how it works. That's what he's doing. And then you sort of become him a bit, and you move around, and you go up and you go down, and and you sort of just get that personality, because there's so many presenters out there and so many journalists that you do have to sort of make yourself a little bit different as well.
And that is, I guess, a development of style in whatever it is. I guess you're writing or you're doing radio or anything like that. I guess, do you think it's very important to develop your own sort of style?
Yeah, I think you've got to look at other people's style, and you've got to see what they do, what works and what doesn't. But eventually, it does come back down to you and your own style. I think you've got to make it your own. And the trick of this is to not think too hard about it. I know the cliche is all be yourself. You can't fake being anyone else or whatever. But it is true. You have to just, however you are in real life, you need that needs to be reflected on the radio. So what they sometimes say is your radio person is yourself plus 10%. So it's Johnny on a good day plus a little bit extra.
Yeah, a little bit more.
And then that's your radio personality.
So a lot of time, related to style, people hear a lot of these things when they start researching journalism as a career, and it's sort of the importance of a personal brand. So whether this be on various different social media platforms or just the way you present yourself, do you think that there is an importance to build this sort of consistent brand around yourself?
I'm a big believer in that, actually. So my social media profiles, for example, their app is all the same. It's always Johnny Jenkins DJ, because I know if you find me on one, then you can find me on others. I'm also very conscious, and they're all public, and I'm also very conscious that you are able to find me. And so I'm not sharing, liking, retweeting, commenting anything that I wouldn't want out there. And that does sometimes mean you think, oh, that meme is really funny, I would love to share that. But I don't, and I'll sort of send it to a friend instead. I'm very aware. I see my social media as a bit of an advert for me, and in that I see a very consistent brand. So I think that's really, really important to sort of keep yourself the same across all these platforms. So, I mean, my name is John. My name is not Johnny, but I'm aware that the brand Johnny Jenkins sounds a lot better than John Jenkins. And so I'm very aware that whenever I go on something, especially if I know someone personally and they sort of call me John, whatever, I say, oh, by the way, can you just make sure you call me Johnny on the radio? Because it keeps that consistent brand. And I think that's really, really important. And especially when you're starting out, you need to, people will start remembering you if they see your tweets regularly or whatever. So I think social media is really important. I think you've got to really sort of throw yourself out there, and also big things up a little bit. Make things sound a little bit bigger than they are sometimes. If you watch something on TV or listen to a podcast, tweet the person who made it. So I really, really enjoyed that. Oh, and ask them a question, and they'll get back to you, and then you can, and if they might follow you back, and then sort of like their tweets and interact with them a bit, and then when you come to them messaging them and saying, can I come and visit you, they're more likely to say yes. I think you've got to just really, really put yourself out there. But yeah, I'm really aware of sort of a brand across all the stuff I do, definitely.
So earlier on, we talked about the importance of being yourself and being authentic. Do you think there can be a difficulty between trying to always be yourself, like on Live Arrow when you're writing, and trying to be authentic, and trying to balance that with trying to in all your social medias always present, I guess, a polished version of yourself, sort of a clean cut and professional version all the time? Do you ever find difficulty in sort of balancing between being authentic in yourself and your personality, and always trying to make sure that you present yourself in the best possible manner and in the most professional possible way?
Yeah, I mean, I think the joy of social media is you don't always have to be incredibly professional as long as you're sensible. As long as you're aware of people are going to be able to see this, you can have a bit of a laugh with yourself. And if you're out and you're having a drink or whatever, you could put it on your story, and that would be fine. But yeah, there is definitely a balance to sort of to strike there between having your own personality, and maybe it's the brand that we've spoken about, that maybe it's your personality that's been manufactured a little bit. But I think sometimes you can be a bit sort of polished version of yourself. If you're tired or whatever, and you go on the radio and you sort of you put on your radio voice and say, hi, it's Johnny Jenkins here on the radio, and then it doesn't always sound that great. You've got to be yourself on it as well. So I think that comes back to making sure you are being yourself and you're not being sort of this character you've created, because you're not going to be able, sure, it might be polished, but you're not going to be able to maintain that. And some days, you're not going to sound quite right. So I think it's really important to just build that brand, that character, whatever, around who you actually are. And then it makes it a lot easier.
On that same point, do you ever feel pressure to try and be, I guess, politically neutral? So a lot of people that we know, and a lot of people who are interested in journalism, a lot of the time they have very strong political opinions. Do you ever feel yourself on Twitter, about to tweet something, about to like or retweet something, and you think, oh, wait a minute, this would be taking a stance, and I want to try and remain, in the middle? Do you ever feel that sort of pressure to try and be, I guess, politically objective or politically neutral?
I found it difficult at first. Because the thing is, the people that are going to get into journalism at a young age are probably also going to be interested in politics. And if you're interested in politics, you're probably going to have an opinion. Yeah. And I, of course, do have my own opinions. I don't talk about them very much. I don't really feel the need to. I think sometimes, they can be reflected in your work a little bit. And sometimes you do. Maybe you hear me sort of hear one seep in here or there. But on the whole, I think it's something I have got better at, and it just sort of takes a bit of practice. So, and doing more and more journalism and doing what I do, especially when it comes to politics, I have actually, I think, lost a lot of my political opinions anyway. I think you sort of become this person who's scathing about every politician everywhere and a bit skeptical of everything, and then that's sort of okay. I think that you can be tough with everybody, but also fair with everybody. And I think you just have to sort of realise actually this isn't about you. If you're doing an interview with a politician, or perhaps you're doing a question time thing where you've got lots of politicians, it's not about you. It's about what they're saying and the lives of the people that are listening. So you have to take yourself out of it a little bit. But I would like to think that even those around me wouldn't know if I'm left or right, if I'm in or out or whatever, because I'm just very aware, like you say on social media, I'm very aware that anything I share, I have to be very careful. And I used to have a blog where I would write my political opinions. Again, it's been taken down now. I'd write my own political opinions about what's going on in the world. And that was my way of sort of getting content out and expressing myself. And I realised, actually, no, I don't want to be a commentator. I'm more interested in the sort of journalist and correspondent role. And if I'm going to do that, I need to take these opinions away a bit. But you can still think about things, and of course I consume so much news. Of course I think about what I'm hearing and then what I'm talking about, but you just have to take yourself out of it a bit.
So is that something that you would recommend to people who are very serious in this specific line of journalism, to say, right, you can be privately political, and like you said, you can think about it all you want, but front facing and to the public, you it is important to, I guess, delete some tweets, delete some articles, and try and appear as objective and politically neutral as possible?
Well, it really depends, because radio and TV and media is so broad. So if you want to go and be a presenter on LBC and you want to be outspoken, and the people that do it on LBC do it brilliantly, then that's fine. Go ahead with your opinions. Put more of them out. Make that into your brand. If you want to be a bit more sort of neutral correspondent, work your BBC sort of presenter, then yeah, you do have to be conscious of that, and the workplaces will tell you that. When I first started covering politics, they said to me, right, you need to make sure you're balanced and you have everyone in, and all different sizes, all different parties and things. And as long as you're aware of that, that's fine. But I think you do need to have a little bit of a think about what you want to do. So when it comes to print, for example, if you are aware that you are right-leaning and your aim is to work for the Telegraph or the Times, then go ahead, put your opinions out there. That's fine. If you want to be a columnist, that's fine. But if in there you think, actually, maybe I want to be a neutral BBC, Sky, ITV presenter, then I would recommend just being wary of what you're saying. You don't need to be completely polished, but just being wary of what you're putting out there.
Of course. So, Johnny, we've gone through all of the ways that you've managed to be successful, all the ways you've created this sort of brand and all your fantastic shows. What can we expect from you in the future? Barring the end of the world, are there any big projects coming up? Anything exciting that people should be tuning into?
So I'm doing more now than I've done before. So I do a daily coronavirus update on Gateway, the station I work at. We do that at 6 p.m. every day. I'm presenting the New Look Drive Time show, which is extended by an hour for now. I'm getting more involved with Southend TV, actually, so more visual things. You can find that on Facebook, and just popping up here, there, all over the place, saying yes, doing as much as I can. And the beauty of it is sometimes you don't really know what you're going to be doing tomorrow. You don't know what you're going to be talking about. And in a few months' time or towards the end of the year, I don't know where I'm going to be and what I'm going to be doing and what I will have done. So I think you just have to just keep saying yes, and but amongst all that, just look after yourself as well. Be aware that you can burn out if you do too much, and I think that's something you will soon learn if you start doing that much. What happens next for me, I don't know. I just keep doing what I'm doing, keep saying yes, because I love it, and I'll continue doing it as much as people want to hear me.
Well, I'm sure that is that if they take nothing else from this podcast, the one thing they will notice is, wow, Johnny is really passionate about this sort of thing. Right, everyone go follow Johnny on Twitter. It's Johnny Jenkins DJ. The Johnny spelled with a H as well. Also on YouTube, Johnny Jenkins, just same thing. Johnny, amazing branding. Consistent branding. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been great.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it.
Hope people have found some help. Anyone trying to get into careers in journalism. Due Future is on iTunes and Spotify if you want to listen to any other platform. If you've enjoyed this, give it a like and a subscribe. Why not?
And if you have any questions, message me. I'm always happy to answer them.
Always message Johnny. He loves a good Twitter follower. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been great. Hope everyone enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you.